This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. It was an extraordinary day in our nation's capital. The President of the United States calling to the White House the two men battling to succeed him to deal with a national crisis. And on Capitol Hill, negotiators working on a bailout package to keep the financial system from collapsing. They're still hammering out the details, but congressional leaders reached agreement on what they say the deal must include: minimizing the risk to taxpayers, strong oversight of the bailout program, help for homeowners in danger of foreclosure, and the $700 billion cost of the rescue would come in installments. Again tonight, we have extensive coverage, beginning with Bob Orr on Capitol Hill.
3 hours before Senators Obama and McCain even arrived for the White House summit, Capitol Hill negotiators announced a tentative deal.
We've reached a fundamental agreement on a set of principles.
But that apparent breakthrough did not sidetrack the high-powered photo op. The president sitting at the same table with the two men who won his job, once again pressed for final passage of the $700 billion financial bailout.
We're in a serious economic crisis in the country, and we know we've got to get something done as quickly as possible.
But the real heavy lifting is being done at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, where the leaders from congressional finance and banking committees who hammered out the framework are now working out details. The final bill, being largely crafted by Democrats with only modest Republican input, will likely include salary caps for executives of firms unloading bad assets, mortgage relief for families facing foreclosure, equity stakes for taxpayers and companies which take the bailout to minimize risk, with an oversight board to hold the Treasury Secretary accountable. Also, the $700 billion would not be spent all at once, but rather in 3 installments, and Congress could vote to withhold half the money.
I now expect we will indeed have a plan that can pass the House, pass the Senate, be signed by the president, and bring a sense of certainty to this crisis.
Wall Street welcomed the optimism, but conservative Republicans in the House, opposed to government intervention in private markets, grumbled that they haven't agreed to anything yet. So the haggling here continues, and let's be clear, there is no final deal yet, Katie.
And Bob, I understand that John McCain actually floated an alternative plan. What can you tell us about that?
We're told at the White House, Senator McCain offered an alternative plan that would include fewer regulations and more corporate tax breaks for businesses, kind of a private solution. But we're also told those ideas angered and surprised Democrats like Banking Chairman Chris Dodd, who now says he thinks the White House summit was more of a political stunt for McCain. It's not clear whether or not this is a real hang-up, because all sides say they still know something has to be done. Katie?
All right, Bob, we're in Washington tonight. Bob, thank you. This financial crisis has come, of course, in the middle of a presidential campaign, a tight race between Senators Obama and McCain. A CBS News New York Times poll out tonight shows Senator Obama hanging on to a 5-point lead. Late this afternoon, I talked to Senator Obama about the bailout and his concerns.
Well, it's not exactly clear. What happened was when I left Florida, landed, I had heard the news that, in fact, a deal was there. People are not obviously happy that we got here in the first place, and we shouldn't have gotten here in the first place. It's a consequence of speculator greed, but also Washington not paying attention and regulators being asleep at the switch. So there's resistance. But there had been at least some core principles that were met. I think that from the Democratic perspective, we just want to make sure that this is helping the small businessman make his payroll, people keeping their money market accounts, that we don't see a cratering of the credit markets that could end up leading to enormous job loss. And obviously, it's pretty frustrating for Democrats, having seen the mismanagement that's been taking place over the last several years, to feel like we've got to step in and get something done, but that's how I think many of us feel, that we can't worry about how we got here. Now we've got to take some serious steps.
You originally seemed to dismiss the idea of coming to Washington as showmanship, saying it wasn't really necessary to inject presidential politics into this process. Have you changed your mind? Do you think it was worth your time coming to Washington?
It's important not to inject presidential politics into this. My preference is to use the phone and to talk to people and work with them, including Secretary Paulson, Chairman Bernanke, and others, in a way that's not a photo op, because I think sometimes that prevents things from getting done. It's amazing what you can get done when you're not looking to try to get credit for it.
Meanwhile, John McCain was also on Capitol Hill today, suspending his campaign so he could be part of the negotiations. We also spoke late this afternoon. Senator McCain, what is the most serious concern that's been expressed about this bailout plan?
We're talking about the biggest event of this kind in history. There's concerns about home ownership, keeping people in their homes. There's some concerns about whether insurance should also be some kinds of options there. There's concerns about restrictions on CEO pay.
Is one of the major sticking points, Senator, how you're going to pay for this thing, whether it's going to be through taxpayer dollars or private investors?
People realize in the Congress what's at stake here, people's jobs, small businesses, their homes. We have to explain that this affects Main Street, not just Wall Street.
If you can't get members of your own party to fall in line, if you will, Senator McCain, will John McCain, the maverick, emerge, and will you buck members of your party?
Well, I'm sorry to, I need not remind you, Katie, I have taken on members of my party and the leadership of my party on numerous occasions. But in this case, I am confident that we will reach an agreement that gets a majority of my colleagues on my side of the aisle as well as a majority on the other side.
Tomorrow in Oxford, Mississippi, the first presidential debate is scheduled to take place. The commission is going forward. Will you be there, or can you just not say at this point?
I understand how important this debate is, and I'm very hopeful, but I also have to put the country first.
Senator John McCain, Senator, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Katie.
Optimism about a bailout deal snapped a three-day losing streak on Wall Street. The Dow gained more than 200 points. It is back above 11,000. But Main Street went to Wall Street today to protest the bailout plan. Hundreds of hard hats, transit workers, and teachers demonstrated outside the New York Stock Exchange. And our CBS News New York Times poll shows little public support for the $700 billion taxpayer bailout. Only 16% say it's a good idea, 38% say it's a bad idea, and 42% say they simply don't know enough about it. Ben Tracy has more on how taxpayers are reacting to the plan.
We need to figure out whether we like the bailout or not. I think that answer is in no.
From talk radio,
let it all collapse,
to the halls of Congress.
The word bailout and Wall Street going together is like nitroglycerin right now.
There is a wealth of bailout backlash. Marie Bonilla's cushion factory in Los Angeles is also stuffed with scorn.
I'm just full of disgust.
Do you feel like you're paying for their mistakes?
I am. I don't feel like I am. It is a fact. I am.
the line is back there.
When IndyMac Bank went bust in July, Bonilla lost $51,000 of her savings.
Now we're going to bail out from the bottom to the top of those people who feel entitled to have my money.
She's angry at politicians, Wall Street, and even her neighbors who bought a lifestyle they couldn't afford.
Many of us did the right thing. We saved our money, we paid our bills, we paid our taxes, we did everything right.
It's the feeling of many taxpayers now stuck with Wall Street's tab. While the bailout may help in the long run, corporate America isn't having to play by the same rules as middle America.
People who thought they're playing by the rules are finding out they're not doing well by that.
It is our money.
Marie Bonilla thinks there should be more outrage.
It's just got to stop. And it takes we the people to stop it.
But for now, it also takes we the people to pay for it. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And coming up next on the CBS Evening News, Sarah Palin on foreign policy.
I am so opposed to Barack Obama's position on that, waving the white flag of surrender.
We'll have more of my exclusive interview when we come back. Turning again to presidential politics, our new CBS News New York Times poll shows Sarah Palin may be losing support among a key group of voters, women. 34% now have a favorable view of the Republican vice presidential nominee. That is down 13 points in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Governor Palin wrapped up her trip to New York City today, stopping by a visitor center dedicated to 9/11 victims and a firehouse next door. This week, I met with her a few miles north of Ground Zero at the United Nations. Much of our discussion focused on foreign policy, which some say could be her weakness. Here now, part 2 of my exclusive interview with Sarah Palin. As we stand before this august building and institution, what do you see as the role of the United States in the world?
I see the United States as being a force for good in the world. And as Ronald Reagan used to talk about, America being the beacon of light and hope for those who are seeking democratic values and tolerance and freedom. And I see our country being able to represent those things that can be looked to as that leadership, that light needed across the world.
In preparing for this conversation, a lot of our viewers and internet users wanted to know why you did not get a passport until last year. And they wondered if it indicated a lack of interest and curiosity in the world.
I'm not one of those who maybe came from a background of, kids who perhaps graduate college and their parents get them a passport and give them a backpack and say, go off and travel the world. No, I've worked all my life. In fact, I've usually had 2 jobs all my life until I had kids. I was not a part of, I guess, that culture. The way that I have understood the world is through education, through books, through mediums that have provided me a lot of perspective on the world.
Governor Palin, you've had a very busy week and you're meeting with many world leaders. You met with President Karzai of Afghanistan. I know the McCain campaign has called for a surge in Afghanistan, but that country is, as you know, dramatically different than Iraq. Why do you believe additional troops, U.S. troops, will solve the problems there?
Because we can't afford to lose in Afghanistan, as we cannot afford to lose in Iraq either. These central fronts on the war on terror. And I asked President Karzai, is that what you are seeking also? That strategy that has worked in Iraq that John McCain had pushed for, more troops, a counterinsurgency strategy, and he said yes. And he also showed great appreciation for what America and American troops are providing in his country.
The United States is deeply unpopular in Pakistan. Do you think the Pakistani government is protecting al-Qaeda within its borders?
I don't believe that new President Zardari has that mission at all. But no, the Pakistani people also, they want freedom. They want democratic values to be allowed in their country also. They understand the dangers of terrorists having a stronghold in regions of their country also. And I believe that they too want to rid not only their country, but the world of violent Islamic terrorists.
You've cited Alaska's proximity to Russia as part of your foreign policy experience. What did you mean by that?
That Alaska has a very narrow maritime border between a foreign country, Russia, and on our other side, the land boundary that we have with Canada. It's funny that a comment like that was kind of made to, I don't know, reporters.
Mocked?
Yeah, mocked, I guess that's the word, yeah.
Well, explain to me why that enhances your foreign policy credentials.
Well, it certainly does, because our next door neighbors are foreign countries. They're in the state that I am the executive of. And
have you ever been
Russia.
Involved with any negotiations, for example, with the Russians?
We have trade missions back and forth. We do. It's very important when you consider even national security issues with Russia, as Putin rears his head and comes into the airspace of the United States of America. Where do they go? It's Alaska. It's just right over the border. It is from Alaska that we send those out to make sure that an eye is being kept on this very powerful nation, Russia, because they are right there. They are right next to our state.
When President Bush ran for office, he opposed nation building, but he has spent, as you know, much of his presidency promoting democracy around the world. What lessons have you learned from Iraq, and how specifically will you try to spread democracy throughout the world?
Specifically, we will make every effort possible to help spread democracy for those who desire freedom, independence, tolerance, respect for equality. That is the whole goal here in fighting terrorism also, is not just to keep the people safe, but to be able to usher in democratic values and ideals around the world.
You met with former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who is for direct diplomacy with both Iran and Syria. Do you believe the U.S. should negotiate with leaders like President Assad and Ahmadinejad?
I think with Ahmadinejad personally, he is not one to negotiate with. You can't just sit down with him with no preconditions being met. Barack Obama is so off base in his proclamation that he would meet with some of these leaders around our world who would seek to destroy America, and without preconditions being met. That's beyond naive, and it's beyond bad judgment.
So are you saying Henry Kissinger is naive for supporting that?
I've never heard Henry Kissinger say, yeah, I'll meet with these leaders without preconditions being met. Diplomacy is about doing a lot of background work first and shoring up allies and positions and figuring out what sanctions perhaps could be implemented if things weren't going to go right. That's part of diplomacy.
You recently said 3 times that you would never, quote, second guess Israel if that country decided to attack Iran. Why not?
We shouldn't second guess Israel's security efforts, because we cannot ever afford to send a message that we would allow a second Holocaust, for one. Israel has got to have the opportunity and the ability to protect itself. They are our closest ally in the Mideast. We need them, they need us, and we shouldn't second guess their effort.
You don't think the United States is within its rights to express its position to Israel? And if that means second guessing or discussing an option?
No, absolutely. We need to express our rights and our concerns. And
but you said never second guess them.
We don't have to second guess what their efforts would be if they believe that it is in their country and their allies, including us, all of our best interest to fight against a regime, especially Iran, who would seek to wipe them off the face of the earth. It is obvious to me who the good guys are in this one and who the bad guys are. The bad guys are the ones who say Israel is a stinking corpse and should be wiped off the face of the earth. That's not a good guy who is saying that. Now, one who would seek to protect the good guys in this, the leaders of Israel and her friends, her allies, including the United States. In my world, those are the good guys.
Incidentally, we confirmed Henry Kissinger's position following our interview. He told us he supports talks, if not with Ahmadinejad, then with high-level Iranian officials without preconditions. You can see more of my interview with Governor Palin on our website at cbsnews.com. And next week, I'll be joining the governor on the campaign trail, and you'll hear more about her positions on domestic issues. And I'll be back with more news in a moment.
Okay, quiet, please. Stand by.
Okay.
Stand by.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get the C-section. Here we go. I just need a little bit of time to review it, but okay, ready? Here we go.
Stand by, please. In 5, 4, 3.
This financial crisis has come, of course, in the middle of a presidential campaign, a tight race between Senators Obama and McCain. A new CBS News New York Times poll out tonight shows Senator Obama hanging on to a 5-point lead. Late this afternoon, I talked with him about the bailout plan and asked him What's the holdup? I'm doing, okay, optimism, A9, what, the whole thing? Okay, there it is. Okay, gotcha. Okay, ready?
In 3, 2.
Optimism about a bailout deal snapped a 3-day losing streak on Wall Street. The Dow gained nearly 200 points. It's back above 11,000. The senior Republican in the U.S. Senate went on trial today for corruption. Ted Stevens of Alaska. Prosecutors say a contractor renovated Stevens' home for free, but the senator failed to report it as a gift. The defense told the court Stevens paid every bill he received for the project and had no idea the contractor wasn't billing him for all the work. Here in New York today, reporters asked Alaska Governor Sarah Palin if she supports Stevens' re-election. She replied, "We'll see where his trial goes." Meanwhile, overseas, Pakistani forces fired warning shots at 2 American helicopters today along the Afghan border. U.S. ground forces later returned fire. No injuries reported. The Pakistanis claim the choppers had crossed into their country. The U.S. military says they never left Afghanistan. Meanwhile, China's space program took another step forward today with the launch of its 3rd manned space flight. This mission includes China's first spacewalk. The Chinese hope to set up their own orbiting space station within the next few years. And I'll be back with a final look at our top story right after these messages.
Tomorrow, our exclusive series continues. Where do the candidates stand on the global threat from Islamic militants? Tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Recapping our top story now, congressional leaders are still working on the details of a bailout package for the financial system, but here are some of the principles they've agreed on so far. They say a deal must minimize the risk to taxpayers. There needs to be strong oversight of the bailout program, help for homeowners facing foreclosure, and the $700 billion cost would be paid in installments. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. We'll be reporting tomorrow night from Oxford, Mississippi, as we bring you the first presidential debate between Barack Obama and John McCain. Our live coverage begins at 9 Eastern Time, 8 Central, 6 in the West. In the meantime, I'm Katie Couric in New York. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.